Today, what we're talking about is cold calling. So I really want to dig into what does cold calling look like in 2021, and how do we go from reluctant to confident? So I don't know about for you, but 2020 was quite the roller coaster. There were lots of up and downs for a lot of our clients. There was lots of up and downs for me personally in our business, figuring out how to do things in a more digital way, and then also figuring out, our clients, how are they prospecting, right? And what are they hearing from their prospects? There was all kinds of stuff like that and required a lot of, adaptation, right? And I don't know about for you, but when all this stuff went down in March and April, our sales pipeline like literally froze overnight. So there was like a 4 to 6 week period where there was not a lot of activity and companies were a bit in a holding pattern and not really sure what to do. And old messaging went out of style pretty quick. So I don't know. Let me know in the chat. Were any of you guys using email templates or talk tracks or anything like that that you feel like as soon as COVID hit, you had to like go back to the drawing board and that wasn't working anymore? Let me know in the chat if that was you. But a lot of our clients, the stuff that they were using before was no longer working. Yeah, Joe says had to pivot like crazy. So the email blasts that we were kind of able to get away with, a lot of those email blasts became spam because a lot of the messaging that we were sending was no longer relevant to the prospect. And we were able to get away with these like batch and blast cold emails or maybe batch and blast cold calling without much relevance, without much personalization. And we were able to get away with it. But when COVID happened, a lot changed. And I don't know about you, but you might have been making calls during COVID and all of a sudden you felt really put on the spot. Prospects might have been giving you objections around COVID that you didn't know how to handle. They might have been giving you objections around price. You might have been getting things around budget, like a lot of those type of things. And it made a lot of people feel like they're really put on the spot because all of a sudden we're getting objections that we don't know how to handle anymore. How do we address COVID? Right. And ultimately, what that led to for a lot of people was experiencing a lot more rejection than normal. And prospects, especially, being a little less patient with a bad cold call or a bad cold email. Does anyone have any challenges in particular that you want to share? Because I'd love to hear from you before we get into cold calling. Where are you having the most challenges with cold calling right now? Let me know in the chat. And I'll give you guys a minute here. I'm really curious, where are you getting hung up the most when it comes to your cold calling? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, we got gatekeepers. Yeah, getting through to a decision maker, people actually picking up the phone. Yeah, people not answering. Yeah, getting a number that works, being articulate. Yeah, people not being in the office. I see a lot of, people not answering. I could give you guys some tips about that today too. That's not something I've had to cover too much in these webinars. So I'm actually going to make a note of that for you guys. So we got like people not answering the phone. Yeah, getting people to stay on the line for 5 seconds. I don't know about you. If you're having trouble with cold calling, it makes me feel a lot better when I see it that other people are having challenges with it too. um, so yeah, just started cold calling, Zach says. Confidence, Tom says. People saying they're not interested. Yeah, so I'm going to put pickups, and then I also have some tool recommendations for you too to get direct dials. Yeah, getting through to a decision maker, getting an answering machine, needing to be more sensitive. Yeah, feeling bad as soon as they answer, Brenner says. Taking control, more relationship building than some. This is all really, really good stuff, you guys. So the good thing is that we're going to be covering most of these topics today. The first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to give you a framework for how to minimize call reluctance. Two, we're going to talk about how do we create a meaningful dialogue or have meaningful conversation with prospects during our cold calls. So how do we make it more than just someone picks up a pitch and they either say yes or no to it? How can we actually get a dialogue going? And Robert says voicemail. We may not have a chance to get to voicemail today, Robert, but I'll do my best. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is how to deflate your most common objections. So if you're getting the not interested, if you're getting the, you know, I'm not the right person. So-and-so is not in the office. So-and-so is, only taking voicemails. Do you have so-and-so's email? We're going to go through all of that stuff today. And someone asked, hey, did we receive the video of this webinar? Yep, I'll send out the recording of this afterwards. I'm not the right person, Kylie says. Cool. You guys are awesome. It's almost like a little distracting to me, like how many people are in here and engaging. So thank you so much for engaging here in the chat. One thing before we dig in really heavy to the content is there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen in Zoom. If you have specific questions so that it doesn't get lost in chat, please put it in the Q&A. And I see a couple of you have already put some stuff in there. So make sure to use the Q&A function. And if it's relevant to what we're talking about, I'll make sure to get to it. One last thing too, I'm going to save maybe the last 10 minutes or so. I'm going to give you a ton of value today. And I'm also going to talk about ways that you can get more support and work with me if you want to. And we'll talk about the prospecting bootcamp. So at that time, I'll let you know. And if that's not something you're interested in, you can just hop off at that time. And if you are, I'll give you some more details about the program and how it works. Cool? All right. So does anyone here, let me know in the chat, has anyone ever been told that like cold calling is dead? Or is anyone here, just give me a yes if you have ever felt like cold calling's dead, or maybe calling feels a little old school to you. And you're like, hey, I thought cold calling didn't work anymore. This feels like a really old school way, to set appointments. Yes, there's a lot of people that kind of resonate with this. Like, well, why are we talking about cold calling? And you're here on this webinar, obviously, right? In this free training. So obviously there's something intriguing about this to you. But yeah, Tony says, hey, that's been said for years. Yeah. So if you've heard cold calling is old school, or had someone like me, people that create content on LinkedIn say that it's dead or whatever it might be, you're definitely not alone. But the way that I think about this is like what we think about like cold calling is actually less important than what our prospects think. So if we try to remove like our emotions from cold calling and the logic part of it also of whether we think it works or not, the fact of the matter is that prospects actually take calls and salespeople set up meetings with them. There's thousands of meetings being set every single day from salespeople in the United States, across Europe, wherever you might be, like setting meetings from their cold calls. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to make you feel like, hey, people are waiting around to take these cold calls. I don't think any prospect like wants to get a cold call. But I think it's important to look at the data, because the Rain Group, they did a big study on this. This is a year or two ago. And they showed that 82% of B2B buyers said they accepted meetings from salespeople who reached out to them in the last 12 months. Caveat, that doesn't mean they accepted all meetings from all the people that reached out to them. It's really the people that do what I'm about to show you today. And they also found that 69% of buyers accepted cold calls from new providers. So even if they already had an existing solution in place, they still wanted to know about what else was out there. So again, the reason why I show you this is that it does work, but there's a few little things that you need to do correctly. So remember, cold calling works best when it's combined with the multi-channel sequence that includes email plus social. So I'm only talking about cold calling today, but what I want to do here next is talk about how cold calling fits into a broader outbound strategy, and then we'll get into cold calling. So here, let me share my desktop. All right, cool. Can you guys just give me like a number 1 in the chat? Can you guys see my desktop? You see my hand moving around? Yeah, okay. I've been having some troubles with Zoom lately, so just want to double check with you guys. Okay, so what I want to do is give you like the broad overview of the framework for prospecting so that you know how this fits in, how cold calling fits in, because these other pieces are really important too. So I'm making the assumption that you have some of these other pieces in place. And if you don't worry about it. Those are things that we cover in our boot camps. I can tell you more about that afterwards if you want to get help with that. So the first thing that we look at, the first bucket of activities we need to be really good at when we prospect is the ability to identify a good fit account and identify a good fit person, so the right person to talk about. So these are your ideal client profiles, or ICPs, and your personas. So it doesn't matter what we say in a cold call if we're not talking to the right company, or if we're not talking to the right person at those companies. So the first bucket of activities out of 3 here that we need to do a really good job with is we need to move away from mass blasts, and we need to move towards a quality first approach. So no longer is it okay to mass blast and just get a big list and start dialing or start emailing. We need to really think about like who's a good fit for our product or service and who are the right people to talk to. And instead of mass blasting, let's take a quality first approach. The next bucket of activities that we need to be really good at in order to land meetings is we need to be able to engage our prospects. And this is our ability to start a conversation. So with this engage piece, this is where your messaging, your sequencing, and your calling skills come in. So this is your ability to create an effective message, which we're not going to really talk about how to come up with the pitch necessarily today. That's a structure that I have called the reply method that I can share with you guys if you want to check it out. There's a free guide on our website on it. But this is, are we coming up with a messaging that is not me-centric? So we can't talk about us. And Rob, I see you're hopping on. You say, hey, I'm sorry I'm a little late. It's all good, dude. You'll get the recording after this, and I'll send it to you. So it's all good. I appreciate you coming. So we need to go from a me-centric approach where we talk all about our product and our service and how awesome our company is and like all the Fortune 500 companies we've worked with. And we need to move into more of a you-centric approach. So you-centric is talking about the prospect, and specifically the thing that bridges the gap between identify and engage. So our ability to find a good fit prospect and starting a conversation with them, engaging them, that's really dependent on these two things. How well do we understand our prospects' problems and their aspirations? So how well do we understand the business problems that our solution solves and what these folks really, really want? The last part of this is convert. So this is your ability to secure a meeting. So we have identifying a good fit opportunity, starting a conversation with them. And once we get a conversation started, so someone responds to our email, someone picks up the phone on a cold call, whatever it might be, we have to actually like secure a meeting, right? I don't know like, how many of you guys have made cold calls and talked to people and you think it goes really well and they don't get a meeting out of it. It's kind of a bummer, right? So what we need to do here is instead of this like always be closing, I love Alec Baldwin and the scene from, yeah, I'm actually spacing. There's a movie. What is it called? You guys help me in the chat. There's a movie with Alec Baldwin where he, Glenn Ross. Thank you, Paul. So there's a movie where he's like A, B, C, always be closing. And he essentially comes in and like pumps these reps up with like this really like pushy approach. And it made for good entertainment, right? But it also made for people being very resistant to salespeople and kind of giving salespeople a bad rap. So yeah, you see this watch, Derek says, yeah, great movie. Well, I would say decent movie, definitely a great scene. But we need to move from this always be closing to teach, don't take. Our prospects don't want to be closed. They don't want to take a meeting with us. They want some insights. They want to know how you're helping customers like them, companies like them, people like them, how you're helping them win, how you're helping them overcome problems. So to secure a meeting, when we get a conversation started in this stage, someone responds to our email, picks up the phone. Usually what this means is that we need to do a good job of objection handling. That's usually one of the big things that comes up that connects this stage to this stage. Dennis says, I feel like prospects don't like being educated. Yeah, I think it depends on how you do it. So good point, Dennis. So if I come in and say, hey, Dennis, you're doing things all wrong. Here's how our clients are doing it. You need to do it that way. That's not education. That's not teaching someone something, right? And I'm not saying you're doing that, Dennis, obviously. But if it was, hey, Dennis, I can see that you have some reps and you guys were doing some cold outreach, it looks like. But what we're finding with a lot of other companies like yours is that they're actually leaning in and taking a quality first approach. and it's helping their reps overcome call reluctance and really take more of a quality-centric approach that lands more meetings. Are you interested in hearing how they're doing that? Like, that's the approach. It's me saying, hey, most teams that send cold emails have really low response rates, like under 5%. I have a framework called the reply method, and it's what sales teams at companies like yours are using to like 2 to 3x their response rates. Is that something I could send over to you? Do you think you might find that helpful? Cool. So that's a way to like teach them something without throwing it in their face and saying that they're doing it wrong. So the goal is not to call people out for doing something wrong. The goal is to share an insight with them. Because you know what I want to know? I want to know what other sales coaches and trainers are doing right now. That's what I want to know. Your prospects want to know, what are other CFOs doing? What are other CEOs doing? What are other SaaS companies doing? What are other insert whatever industry you have? We need to come in and provide those insights. So what I'm going to talk primarily about today is the calling piece. So again, not going to talk about this bucket. We're going to talk a little bit about objection handling. But if you're like, hey, I want to, send better emails and like sequence better and all of that other stuff, I'll let you guys know at the end how you can get some more information on that. All right. We cool so far? Maybe give me like a G to G if you're good to go in the chat. Want to make sure you guys are all hanging on here. Yeah? We good to go? Cool. Awesome. All right. So let's talk about call reluctance. So there is a 4-part process that I use to help people minimize call reluctance. And this actually comes from, if you want to read a little bit more about it on chopra.com, this comes from a technique called pattern interruption that a lot of like therapists and things like that use to help people overcome addictions or like really bad habits and even trauma. So it's something I've learned about just through going to therapy myself and then also doing a lot of research on this, and it totally helps with call reluctance. So what I'd love to hear from you in the chat here is, if you experience call reluctance, what are some of the things that you tell yourself in your head? So before you go to make a call, if you're getting kind of nervous, like what are some of the things that hold you back from actually making those calls? What's kind of the internal dialogue that you're telling yourself? Okay, Joelle says, hey, this is a waste of time. This doesn't work. This isn't going well. The person might be rude, Angela says. They're going to give me attitude. They'll be angry. They'll be rude. Keep them coming, you guys. So we'll write that one down. They'll be rude. I really like that one. That'll be a good one to work with. The account is trash. I'm going to trip over my words. I just had this phone training and 2 phrases that worked really well. Yeah, that's pretty cool, David. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, lack of confidence. I don't want to bother them. Okay. Let's write that one down too. So hopefully you can see in the chat here that if you're thinking those things, I sound salesy, I don't want to be rude, that sort of stuff, you're not alone. So there's 4 steps here. So the first step is you want to identify the pattern. So this is the easy part, right? That's what you did just now. Identifying the pattern is, I have call reluctance. I don't like to pick up the phone because it feels salesy to me. I don't like to pick up the phone because I think it might be a waste of time, right? So you've done the easy part already. You've identified the pattern. The second part to this, though, is pinpointing the trigger. So pinpointing the trigger, what we want to do here is get super specific with what are we feeling and when do we feel it. So for example, when you think about like, hey, I don't want to be a bother to this person, what we want to do is get super specific with like when we feel that. So an example of that is, hey, when I'm researching the person on LinkedIn and like I see their picture, like they just look like a super intimidating person. I look at their work experience. They have so many years of like work experience. Like, why would they want to hear from me when I've only been doing this for a few years, when they have like 20 years of like executive experience, right? A lot of people think that. You guys, newsflash, before this webinar, you know what I was thinking? God, there's like 500 plus people signed up for this. Like, that's going to really suck if I blow it and people don't get value from it, right? So I have imposter syndrome, like, and I experienced that like 5 to 10 minutes right before this webinar. So call reluctance, imposter syndrome, like, dude, that's like, it's all the same stuff. You're human if you experience it. So what we need to do after we pinpoint the trigger, and I'm going to give you 3 techniques for this, is we need to derail and replace. So what we need to do is we need to derail this thinking, and we can do that in a couple different ways. And Sarah Becker says, confirm, salespeople still have feelings, LOL. Yeah, salespeople definitely have feelings. We have feelings, we have emotions, and all of that impacts our ability to sell and prospect, right? So the first technique you could use is something called diffusion. And essentially what diffusion is acceptance. So the way that you can look at this emotion, I don't want to be a bother, is we look at this in two parts. So you have feelings on one side, and then you have reality on the other side. The way you feel about something is not necessarily connected to reality. So I'll give you a really silly example. I had a nightmare a couple weeks ago, and I usually don't have nightmares, but sometimes when I take melatonin, I just have like really weird dreams. So I wake up in the middle of the night, it's dark, and I'm like, I had a dream about something like ghosts or something like kind of paranormal like that. And I wake up and I am immediately in this state of like, I'm kind of like afraid and scared because I'm like, oh, is there like a ghost in like my bedroom? You know what I mean? Very, very silly, right? Because ghosts aren't real. Just let up. Hopefully, I didn't burst anyone's bubble there. So ghosts are clearly not real, right? There was nothing in the room, but the way I felt about it was connected to reality for like a minute or two. My feeling of, oh my God, there's something paranormal, like there could be something in here to get me, that was what I felt like was reality. Diffusion is separating those two things and treating your feelings, not pushing them away, accepting them. So, what actually helped me is going through this process, and I'll give you an example here in a second. But if you feel like you're going to be a bother to someone, don't like try to do the opposite and say like, hey Jason, I need to have a positive attitude right now and like pump myself up to make calls. Like be positive, dude. That doesn't really help. Like if you just acknowledge how you feel and then know that that is disconnected from reality, because you know what? Like they'll be rude. Most people are not rude if you cold call them and do some of the things that I'm going to share with you today. This is like maybe one out of every 25 people that you call is going to be a total jerk. Most of the people, if you make an attempt to like personalize the approach and make it about them, most of them are not going to be rude. So your feeling of like, oh, they'll be rude, I don't want to be a bother, let's disconnect that from reality. And Angela says, have you ever cold called in France? Yeah, I know that Europe has some nuances with cold calling. So the first thing we need to do is just totally accept it. So if you're having that creeping feeling come in over like, hey, I feel like I might be rude or this person might be rude, just accept it. Don't try to push it away. The next thing you can do is ask yourself, is this helpful? So you know what's not helpful is me debating back and forth in my head if the content I have today is going to deliver value to you or not. That's not helpful. It's okay for me to think about that and have some imposter syndrome and like, oh man, like I wonder if what I'm sharing is like going to be impactful. And there's like a couple hundred people hopping on the call, and I hope I don't waste their time. It's okay for me to think that. But if I separate that from reality, I take those emotions and separate it from reality and just ask myself, regardless of if the content's helpful or not, and playing this logic trap with my mind, is it helpful for me to think that? No, it's actually not helpful. Right? So if you have this stuff creeping in, you don't know if the person's going to be rude or not. So, like, just, hey, is it helpful for me to think this? Yes or no? And if it's not helpful, just be like, hey, okay, cool. I acknowledge that. I'm a little worried they might be rude, which is totally normal. But let me focus on something else instead. And this is that something else. So, what you can do is you can create a character. So, this is also part of this technique of diffusion. So, if you guys want more info on this, it's called ACT. It's a form of therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. So if you've ever been like really turned off by the be positive, like kind of bullshit, like out there, we're like, oh, be positive, like get motivated, like that kind of thing. Acceptance commitment therapy is kind of the opposite of that. It's like, how do you like motivate yourself without like just like forcing down like negative emotions and like trying to change them and judge yourself? So what you can do is create a character. So I call it the call reluctance monster. So whenever I feel call reluctance or imposter syndrome, I give it a character. And my character is Borat. So, like when I was scared in the middle of the night, I literally imagined Borat And I talk to myself in my head with the Borat voice. So I might do something like this, and this is going to be kind of funny. It's like, yeah. So Irv commented there, very nice, right? That's what I do. I talk to myself in that voice, like, oh, I am here to haunt your dreams. You know, I talk to myself like that. I see Borat, and it just kind of makes me laugh because it's so silly. So what you can do is, and another person in one of our boot camps, Mick, he uses SpongeBob. So when he's feeling call reluctance coming, he's like, oh God, this person could be rude. He's asking himself, is this helpful? He's like, no. And then he imagines SpongeBob like talking to him and being like, hey, I'm the call reluctance. I don't know SpongeBob's voice. It's like SpongeBob, the call reluctance monster. I'm like, I'm here to freak you out and make cold calling a much bigger deal than it actually is. So what I'd love to know from you in the chat here is what character, if you experience call reluctance, what character can you use to like characterize this and make it kind of funny? How can you make call reluctance funny to deal with versus something that's like super serious? So someone said The Rock, Paul says. Kylie likes Borat. I love Borat too. Sheldon, Sven from Frozen, Ryan says. Yeah, let me know in the chat. Rocky Balboa, Tally Cartman. Stewie Griffin, South Park, Mickey Mouse. I love this. Cartoon characters work really well too. And again, this is not some hippy dippy thing I'm sharing with you guys. This is like stuff they use in therapy to help people overcome trauma, actually. So, Trailer Trash Tammy, Scooby Doo, Andrea says, Larry David, Irv. I love Larry David. That's a really good one. Austin Powers. You guys are awesome. Love it. So what we can do is derail and replace this here by accepting it, asking ourselves if it's helpful, and then giving it a character, giving it a voice. Randy Savage, someone says, Dora the Explorer, Susanna says. Um, I love it, you guys. So the fourth step here is practice and reward. So you know what's going to happen later today is you're probably going to make a cold call and you're not going to do this. You're going to experience call reluctance and you're probably not going to go through this process. That's okay because it takes practice. So what I would think about after this call is how can I create a character for this and how can I like kind of walk through my internal dialogue and be more mindful. So maybe one cold call a day before you make it, you try to go through this and make it a daily habit. Every time you do something that's a little bit scary, you listen to that voice, you ask yourself if it's helpful, and you talk to yourself in that voice, not out loud necessarily. I don't do it out loud unless you want to. It might be kind of weird for other people in your home. You're going to give it a character. So that's how we deal with call reluctance. And we can't eliminate call reluctance. So just so you know, it hardly, I don't know a single person where they say they don't have any call reluctance at all and it's completely gone away for them. I don't hear that from any person that I've ever talked to in sales. Most people still get nervous before they make a cold call. I've been doing cold calls, whether it be door to door or over the phone since 2008. I still get nervous before I call a VP of sales. So don't try to not get nervous. Just try to accept it a little bit more. Yeah, Chris, I'm gonna start imagining Jason Bay pretending to be Borat. Yeah, if that does it for you, like that does it for you. Okay, that's call reluctance. So I want to get you guys some more tactical stuff here around cold calling. So what I want to do, let's talk about how to cold call a target contact. So let's say that you get someone on the phone, and there's two things actually I wanted to share with you too. So if you're having low pickup rates, I suggest doing two things. I would look at a tool called Apollo.io. Neither of these companies are sponsoring what we do. So just so you know. So I love these two tools. You can use these to get direct dials. So Apollo.io is a great tool to get like cell phone numbers. So if you have low pickup rates, make sure that you're like have access to direct dials and cell phone numbers. I always recommend these two tools, Apollo.io and Lead IQ. The other thing that you can do is called a double tap. So a double tap peers, yes. Yep, that's for UK also. So the other thing that you can do too is a double tap. So this might feel a little bit uncomfortable for some of you, but you're going to call a person, and if they don't pick up, instead of leaving them a voicemail, you're going to try calling them right back, and you're only going to leave a voicemail on that second call. Yeah, so Chris Hall says he loves the double tap. Again, like the double tap is a really, really great technique. I see it increase pickup rates by like 10 to 20% higher than what you're getting right now. So the double tap is a really good one. And then lastly, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. local time for your prospect. A company called Zant, and you can look them up if you want. They're a competitor of like Outreach, SalesLoft. They do sales engagement platforms. They did a huge study on pickup rates with people that use their platform, and they found that the pickup rates were the highest between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. local time. Kind of interesting, right? So try to get direct dials. These are just two of the tools. Double tap. Try to make the calls between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. Chris, you shared a really great technique, Chris Hall, 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after every hour. So especially for executives, oftentimes they'll get meetings done early, maybe 5 minutes early. And you can call them before their next meeting or right after a meeting that they got done with. So that's another really great technique too. Yep, and Rob, those sites work to get those direct lines. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's say that you get the target prospect on the phone. There's kind of three parts to this process. So the first part is there's the intro portion of the call, there's the hook, and then there is the close. So here's how this works. So what we're going to want to do here in our intro is we really want to reverse engineer what the experience is like for the prospect on the receiving end of a cold call. So when we get cold calls, most of the time what we're thinking is what? Who is this? Who are you? And why are you calling me? Right? So the very first thing that we need to do is what I call remove the surprise. Every single call, without fail, you got to introduce yourself. There's kind of mixed opinions on if you should do your first name and then like the company name or just your name. You got to introduce yourself. At a bare minimum, you got to do your name. I say, my name's Jason with Blissful Prospecting. So remove the surprise. The very first thing you need to do is like reduce the anxiety for the prospect by introducing yourself real quick. You don't need to talk any more about your company or what your company does or anything like that. And then the next thing you need to do is use a permission based opener. So one of the big mental blocks that can hold us back in prospecting is thinking that we need, because someone said this earlier, I need to control the conversation. And I don't know about you, when I talk to people, I don't like feeling like they're controlling the conversation and that I don't get to participate in it. So that doesn't feel good to me if I'm a prospect. I don't like when someone else is controlling the conversation. So instead of controlling the conversation, we need to do the opposite. And if we give the prospect some autonomy and allow them to have a choice and opt in to the call, they're actually much more likely to give us a favorable outcome. So people are much more likely to be open to a conversation and to hear you out if they feel like they have a choice. So we're going to allow them to opt in. So a permission-based opener looks like this. So there's three parts to this. So you're going to empathize. You're going to make a specific ask for time. And then you're going to ask for permission. So here's what that might sound like. So the empathize piece is we're going to think about what's this person on the other end of the line thinking. And then the time part is a specific amount of time that we would like. And the permission piece is we're going to allow them to opt in and say yes or no. And again, by giving them a choice and allowing them to opt in, they're much more likely to say yes. So here's what that might sound like. This is my go-to. Hey, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Look, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, but I was wanting to know, do you have 30 seconds? I could tell you why I'm calling real quick, and you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. So Sandler Training kind of came up with like upfront contracts. So they kind of popularized this technique. So you could do something like really straightforward like that. I like having a little bit of fun with it too. So for example, if I call someone in the morning and it's a busy executive, I might say something like this. Hey, Rob, I know I caught you in the morning here, and I imagine you got a ton of meetings scheduled the rest of the day, so I'll make this quick. Do you got a minute? I could tell you why I'm calling, and you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, so Ligia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, you said, what if they say no with that permission? Let's talk about that, right? We're going to talk about that next with objection handling, right? That's kind of like the not interested piece. But you know what? 8 or 9 times out of 10, people say yes, or they say sure, or they kind of chuckle a little bit, right? So we'll get into that response here. So what if the person says no, which will probably happen once or twice out of 10 times. But by doing this, we're allowing the person to opt in, and they're much more likely to give us what we want there and give us a chance to actually talk about why we're calling. So the other thing that you can do too that I really like if you want to have some fun with it is you could say, hey, Dennis, this is Jason. Look, this is a cold call, and I know you weren't expecting this, but do you got a minute? I could tell you why I'm calling, and you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. So you could be super straightforward, candid, and kind of chuckle a little bit like, hey, I'm totally cold calling you right now, Dennis. I know you weren't expecting this, but my name's Jason. I just want to know if you got 30 seconds. I could tell you why I'm calling you. You could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, so I think people say yes, but are not really engaged more often than not. So it's a great point, Dennis. By doing this real quick at the beginning, it usually captures the person's attention because they're like opting in to the conversation, right? So the next part that we need to do, and we don't have time to dig into like the whole reply method today, but our pitch, and if you haven't heard of the reply method, reply is an acronym, and we're going to do the R, the E, and the P in our pitch. And let me actually, just because we don't have a lot of space, guys, let's do this right over here. So we're going to do this in reverse order. So the P is for personalization. The E is for empathy. So this is where you talk about a problem that you solve. And then relevant results. So I'll give you an example. So this is a company that we've worked with that helps to essentially prevent companies from overspending on their utilities. So what's pretty common here in the United States is there's these big utility companies that, like, for trash, electricity, they kind of control the pricing, and they can overcharge and put all of these little things in fine detail into a bill for a large company, and the company can end up overspending like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one of their personas and their prospects are CFOs at like property like management companies. So companies that help manage like hundreds of commercial properties. So the problem again is that these companies are being overcharged by their utilities and they don't even know it. So what that might sound like in the cold call is this. Hey, Janice, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Look, I know I probably catch you in the middle of something, but you got a minute? I could tell you why I'm calling. You could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, go ahead, Jason. Well, the reason I was calling is one, I noticed that you guys manage around 250 properties just in the South here in Texas and a few other states, which I thought was super impressive. And one thing that I noticed that you really care a lot about is getting the best ROI possible on the properties that you're managing. One of the problems that we oftentimes hear is that sometimes people get into a situation where the utility companies are actually overcharging them, which is no fault of your own, by the way, because they make it really complicated to see like kind of all the fine print and that sort of stuff. And the reason I was calling you today is I was wondering if I could share some of the ways that we're helping companies like yours see these charges and prevent themselves from being overcharged. So something like that, right? We're going to give the personalization, this thing that I saw. I'm going to talk about the problem, and then I'm going to talk about how we can help or something that we can teach them. And then what's going to connect the intro to the hook is we're going to do another permission ask. This is optional, but I really like doing it because it keeps the prospect engaged. Yeah, so Irv, we're going to talk about that objection next. That's going to be the very next thing that we go through is the objection handling piece of this. So remind me, Irv, in the chat, remind me if I don't cover it, remind me to cover that one, okay? So what we're going to do here, so after we give our little pitch there, we're going to say, hey, is it cool if I ask you 2 or 3 questions to see if this might be relevant for you? And again, that part's optional. You could leave out the permission ask and you could just get straight to the questions. But I find that it's more engaging if I check in with a prospect again and say, hey, is it cool if I ask you 2 or 3 questions to see if this might be relevant for you? Yeah, awesome, cool. So this is where we're going to get into question stacking. So with question stacking, I have a whole framework around it that we don't have time necessarily to cover today, but I want to kind of give you like the TLDR for anyone that's on Reddit, the TLDR, or not on Reddit, excuse me. The TLDR is kind of like the short explanation of something. So with question stacking, what we want to do is ask them a series of like 2 or 3 questions. And the first one needs to be like a really short easy to answer question because we're trying to get the prospect talking. The more the prospect talks in this cold call, the more that they are going to feel a relationship and a connection with you, and the more likely they are to take a meeting. So we need to get them talking. So the first question, if I'm using this example, might sound something like this. Um, hey, I know that you're the CFO and that you have a decent sized finance team, it looks like. Is there a system that you guys have in place to make sure that like your utilities aren't like overcharging you in any way or anything like that? And that's it. Right? We're going to ask something really easy to answer like that. If I'm cold calling and selling our boot camps and our prospecting training, I might ask something really simple like, hey, I noticed you guys have like BDRs and AEs. I'm really curious. Do BDRs do all the prospecting, or do the AEs do some of their own prospecting as well? How does that work for you guys? So what I'm doing with those questions, I'm displaying some empathy in that I understand a little bit about what it's like in your industry. Like if I'm asking that question, do the BDRs do all the prospecting or do the AEs do some of the prospecting? I'm showing them that I understand how companies like are set up like theirs. Right? So think about those quick hitting questions like that. And then we want to get into like some of the more problem oriented questions. And that's where we can dig into something a little bit deeper. Yeah, and Vivian says, what questions do you ask gatekeepers to get past them? We're probably not going to get a chance to like dig into gatekeepers a ton, but we will talk about some objection handling stuff next. So we'll get to that, Vivian. So we need to ask a couple questions here to get the prospect talking. Once we get some interesting stuff from the prospect, what's going to connect the hook and the close is we want to summarize. So we're going to summarize what we heard back to the prospect, and then we're going to get agreement. So what this allows them to do is feel like they are driving the call, but really like we're kind of driving the call, right? We're the one asking the questions. So if we're asking a series of questions, and I'll use this example again, they talk about the fact they're not really doing this and it's never something they've looked in for. So what I'm going to summarize is like, okay, cool, Bob. So what I heard is that you aren't quite sure with your utilities if you're being overcharged. You've tried negotiating some of this stuff in the past and it hasn't worked out so well. And it's something that you're open to revisiting. Did I miss anything? So that's the get agreement stage. Did I miss anything? You're going to show a little bit of empathy again and be a little humble here and try not to look like a know-it-all. You're not going to be assumptive. You're going to be really curious, did I miss anything? So these two steps here, that's going to help us build an agenda for the call that's like really you-oriented, as in the prospect, like oriented around them and what they want to talk about. So the next thing we can do is schedule time. So I don't know if any of you guys know Nick Sigelski, but he has a podcast. I'm going to send it to you. It's called 30 Minutes to President's Club. Really great podcast. I've been on there a couple times. I've interviewed Nick and Armand both. But what Nick likes to say here that I love is once you get agreement, you say, hey, did I miss anything? The prospect's like, no, that sounds good. You say, hey, well, how about this? Do you have your calendar handy? I'd love to schedule a time to discuss further when I'm not, cold calling you in the middle of your day. So, hey, do you have your calendar handy? I'd love to schedule a time to discuss a little bit more when I'm not cold calling you in the middle of your day here. So I'm going to schedule time with a prospect, and then I'm going to do a triple confirmation. So triple confirmation has three parts. You're going to confirm calendar invite. So you're going to get them to accept the calendar invite on the call. So you're going to say something like this. Awesome. So what is your day looking like on Friday? I have some spots early in the morning. What's your availability look like? Oh, cool. I have this time open. Awesome. So I'm going to put you down for 11 a.m. Central Friday. I sent you the calendar invite just now. Can you go ahead and do me a quick favor? Because I want to make sure I got this to the right email. Can you go ahead and look and make sure that came in and accept the calendar invite for me real quick? I'll give you a couple seconds here. Let me know if you're having trouble finding it. Boom. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm the agenda. All right. So that's connecting this to this. So the thing that you summarized and that you got agreement around, hey, and just to confirm again, what I really want to make sure to talk about is the fact that you've tried negotiating some of these things in the past. You're not quite sure what the amount is that you could potentially be overcharged. So we can definitely talk about that. And I'll save some time if it's appropriate at the end for us to talk about ways that we might be able to help. Does that sound good? Cool. And then lastly, what you're going to confirm is a confirmation email. So what you're going to do here is you're going to confirm the person's that if we're meeting on Friday, let's say, if it's 48 hours or more out, you're going to send a confirmation email the day before. And I'm going to say something along the lines of, hey, one last thing, Bob. I'm going to send a confirmation email to you tomorrow just to confirm our meeting for Friday. There's also going to be a couple cool resources in there for you as well. And can you respond to that email when you get a chance, just so I know that we're good to go for Friday? Awesome. Okay. I got to keep moving, you guys, because we got to get to objection handling. And it looks like I didn't print out the sheet for this, so you guys are going to get to see my chicken scratch. Okay, so with objections, real quick, what I want to do is run you through what we call our EVO framework. And it looks like this. So we're going to talk about some of those more shallow objections. So EVO stands for empathize. You can see empathy is a big part of this approach, right? Empathize, validate, and then offer. So Array, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You ask, how do you get their email before the call? Use one of those. You can ask for their email on the call too if you don't have it. So use Apollo.io, LeadIQ. Use one of those tools to get email addresses, or ZoomInfo, whatever tool that you use. So what we need to do, the problem with how we typically handle objections is oftentimes we come in first with the offer. So if someone says, hey, I'm not interested, like what we'll say is something like, well, hey, I hear you. We were working with this other company, and you know what they told me at first is that they weren't interested, but they ended up and took a meeting with me anyways. And they found all this stuff, and here are the results. And it's like, ugh. As a prospect, I'm like, dude, don't use feel, felt, found on me, right? As a prospect, I'm also like, I want to feel understood. And that's where empathy comes in, right? I want to know that you're listening. I want to feel acknowledged because I don't care logically if it makes sense to meet with you or not. I don't care logically if you have a better solution than the one we're using today. Like, I don't care about the logic behind it. If people were so wrapped up in logic, everyone would exercise every single day and eat perfect diets, right? I think everyone knows that they probably should exercise more and they, for the most part, know how to eat healthy. But why don't a lot of people do it? It's for emotional reasons, right? It's not a logical thing. I think a lot of people know logically what they should be doing. It's the same thing here. So when we empathize and validate, what we do is disarm. We can disarm the prospect, right? So here's what that sounds like. So we can use a phrase like this. Sounds like ... And then we can use totally understand ... So let's say the prospects respond with not interested. Give me a why in the chat. Does anyone ever have a prospect on a cold call say, I'm not interested? Let me know in the chat. Give me a why. Yeah? A few people? Okay, I just want to make sure you guys are still alive out there, okay? Webinars are weird because I can't see you. All I could do is like chat with you. So it's interesting. So when someone says not interested, what we need to do is think about what is on their mind. What are they thinking? Why would they say something like that? And typically when someone says not interested, what they're really saying is, hey, I thought you were someone else. I'm in the middle of something. They may genuinely just not be interested. There's all kinds of different reasons, but they kind of don't want to talk to you. So what we're going to do to empathize and validate them is it's going to sound something like this. So if prospects like, hey, not interested, Jason. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. If that's the case, I totally understand why now wouldn't be the best time to take a call. Imagine like the disarming effect that's going to have on most prospects. I'm telling you like, hey, it's totally okay that you're not interested. And then for the offer piece, that's where I can ask more of like maybe a no-oriented question like, hey, would it hurt? Is a line that I like to use a lot. But hey, would it hurt if I took a minute to tell you why I'm calling? Because I actually did a lot of research on your company. And then you can let me know if you even want to keep chatting and if this is relevant for you. Is that cool? And oftentimes you can kind of flip that around. So if it's a really shallow objection, like not interested, not right now, etc. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. And you know what? If that's the case, I could totally understand why now might not be the best time to take a call. but this might be a long shot. Would it hurt if I took like a minute to tell you why I'm calling? And you can let me know if this is even something that we should talk about at a later time or not. Yeah, would it be okay? I love that one too, David, that you shared. But hey, would it be okay if I did this? So that's the objection handling piece. There was like one other one, like send me more information, I think it was. Um, so when someone says send me more information, it's like, hey, dude, sounds like you're like really conscious of like your time, and I bet the last thing you want to do is like schedule a half hour with a salesperson, and then for that to be a complete waste of time. So I'm totally happy to send you more information. But while I have you, would it hurt if we dug into some of the things that are really important to you, so that if I send you some more information, it's actually relevant? Boom, we can go into that. Um, so that's the objection handling piece. I know that we didn't get to dig into everything today, but just to kind of circle back here, here's what we talked about today. We really talked about we need to be able to identify a good fit opportunity and move from mass blast to quality first. We need to be able to start conversations with people. And to do that, we talked about cold calling and objection handling primarily. And in order to convert and secure a meeting, we need to have something that we can teach and need to be able to handle objections along the way. So what I want to do now here is I want to go back to our slides, and I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Where do you feel like you need to improve the most? When it comes to your cold calling, let me know in the chat. Based on what you learned today, where do you feel like you need to improve the most? Love to hear from you. Let me know in the chat. Raman says opening. Nick says just calling more. We have confidence, sequencing, opening, objections, questions, objection handling, confidence, closing, elevator pitching, Roman says, getting back into it. So practicing, Catherine says. Susanna, I need to learn about it all, really. LOL. Hey, that's totally cool. That's why you guys are here today. Opening and objection handling, practicing. Stamina, Joshua says, yeah. So just kind of getting into a good rhythm and having good, kind of endurance when it comes to doing these. Yeah, reaching people, following up, smooth transitions. Jose says all of it. Yeah, David, I think you mentioned a really big thing there. You language, making it about them, not taking rejection personally. I love it, you guys. So what I want to do now, I appreciate all the engagement so far. I'm going to tell you, if you want to learn a little bit more about other ways that you might be able to work with me and get some extra support here, we have something called a prospecting boot camp. So now is like, if you don't want more information on this, now's the time to hop off. Not going to hurt my feelings, like totally okay. But if you are looking for some more information on the prospecting boot camp and just other ways that you can get additional help with this and work with me, I'm going to go ahead and let you know that right now. So go ahead and hop off. This is something that's not relevant for you. All good. Go ahead and hop off and let me tell you a little bit more about the prospecting boot camp. So essentially the prospecting boot camp, it focuses a lot on all of the areas of outbound prospecting on top of cold calling. So if you've ever had any challenges of like, hey, I'm not sure like what the good fit companies and the right job titles are to go after, maybe you're writing cold emails and they take too long and your response rates are low. Maybe you're building sequencing and the sequencing and cadences like aren't producing repeatable results for you. Maybe you've heard of this personalization at scale thing, but you're like, dude, if I personalize like that takes way too long. And maybe call reluctance. Some of the stuff we talked about today is keeping you from picking up the phone, and maybe that makes you hide behind email and LinkedIn. And maybe you freeze up when a prospect gives you objections. And what you really want, I got Mr. Will Ferrell there and Jim Carrey. Yeah, Kelly, we definitely talk about classes about getting more comfortable with video. That's definitely a topic that we cover in the boot camp. So what you really want is like, hey, I would like to know exactly what companies are the perfect fit for my product or service so I don't waste time going after companies that are not a good fit. I'd love to be able to streamline the cold email process and get double-digit reply rates. These are all things that I hear from people like you, by the way. I'd love to build a badass sequence or cadence that actually produces repeatable results and tells me exactly how many times I need to reach out to someone. Catherine says yes to that one. Yeah. Hey, I'd love to know exactly what to look for when personalizing my emails so I don't go down this rabbit hole where I spend an hour researching someone and don't find anything. I'd love to feel more confident picking up the phone and securing meetings over the phone. And I'd love to feel confident handling any objection that my prospects give me. And by the way, handling doesn't mean that you get a meeting every time you handle it, but to feel good. When someone says not interested, not right now, we got another provider, etc. So if you relate with any of this stuff, here's how we can help. So there's kind of three parts. Yeah, ramen. So there's kind of three parts to this. I'll kind of go through the content first real quick because we only got a couple minutes. There's 6 modules. There's like 13 hours of like on-demand content that you'll get lifetime access to. So in the first module, it's all about finding the perfect fit prospect. So if you've never actually formally developed a client an ideal client profile, excuse me, and built out personas and like understand your prospect's language, we're going to cover that. Module tools, choose the reply method. So that's the framework I sort of hinted at today around cold emails and how to double your response rates, how to personalize subject lines. Module 3 is all about sequencing. So if you want to know what kind of that recipe is for how many touches over what period of time, what tools you should use, etc. Module 4 is all about cold calling. So it's an in-depth dive of what we went over today. Module 5 is about deflating objections. So how do we handle and deflate those objections? And module 6 is about like how do we scale this kind of stuff? So there's 3 parts to it. You get access to the course lifetime. You actually get group Q&A calls with me. So you get 6 of those. So you can hop on a call with me and I get to interact with you personally and help you through your challenges. And then you also get access to a playbook. So there's scripts, worksheets, templates, like all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Later, Lydia. Later, Alex. So if you want some more info on this, I'm going to go ahead and drop this in to the chat right now. I'll follow up with you personally after this call. Send an email to that email address, jason@blissfulprospecting.co. So it's another email address that I have where I want to filter all of this stuff. If you have and you want some more information on this bootcamp and you think it might be a fit, email me, jason@blissfulprospecting.co, and put bootcamp into the subject line, and I'll get you all the information. Not everyone is a good fit for this. There's certain criteria I might need to meet. So let me know. I'll let you know if it's, I'll ask you some questions and see if it's a good fit. Angela, and by the way, I'm going to be on here for a couple more minutes. So if you guys have more questions, feel free to just ask them in the chat here. So Angela asked, how regularly do you do the boot camps? So the calls are every Tuesday and Thursday. So you get to kind of pick which call is a good fit for you, and they run every single week outside of like holiday weeks. And there's a few weeks here and there where I do vacations and stuff, and I just extend the time. But let me know. Any other questions? I'm going to hang on here for a couple more minutes. We still have over 100 people on the webinar. Beth, I'll send a replay out to you after this so that you can get a copy of the presentation. And again, if you want some more info on the bootcamp, just reach out to me personally, jason@blissfulprospecting.co, and just put bootcamp in the subject line. Robert asked what times on Tuesday and Thursday. The times of the calls right now are 2:30 Pacific time, US, on Tuesdays, and then 7 a.m. Pacific time Thursdays. So I'm trying to kind of accommodate anyone that might be in India or Australia or New Zealand and kind of throughout the US as well. Yeah, no problem, Robert. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, you bet, Craig. Do we have any other questions? Now's the time to ask in the chat. If you think that are remotely interested in any of this stuff, I'd love to chat with you. So send me an email afterwards if you think it'd be a good fit. Swati asked, do we get a recorded video? Yep, I'll send it to you. Yep, Pacific time, Bruce. Yep. Yeah, Pacific time. And I can get you some more details and stuff like that too. So let me know in the chat here. Anyone have any more questions that I can help you with? And you bet. I'm so glad that you guys got value. The whole thing with this for me is like, I want to make sure this is a productive use of your time if you're taking an hour out of your day, to do this. So you bet, you guys. Yeah, no problem, Ronan. Yep, Robert, I'll send a recording over this. A lot of people are asking about recordings. You'll get a recording later this afternoon. And Angela, you bet. Yeah, no problem, Roman. Yeah, so the call times, I'll throw these into the chat, Bruce. So it's Tuesdays at 2:30 p.m. PT, and then Thursdays at 7 a.m. PT. Every Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah, good question, man. Anything else? I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes here. Yeah, Raymond, overcoming or passing gatekeepers. That's gonna have to be a topic for another webinar. And if you want some more help on that, we have a whole module on that too in our bootcamp. So let me know, Raymond. You can either send an email to me after this or keep your eyes peeled, for the next webinar. I didn't have a chance to cover it today, so we had a lot of content. Zachary, can you show the Evo drawing again? Absolutely, man. There you go, Zach. Or Zachary. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else got any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Drop it in the chat. Let me know if you guys got any questions, either on anything that we come out around today. Yeah, John listens to 30 Minutes to President's Club. Awesome. Yeah, the handwritten sheets, Alejandro. A lot of those are like in the boot camp stuff. Otherwise, you're gonna need to take like screenshots and stuff of this. Um, or you can send me an email too, and I might be able to get it to you as well. All right. You got anything else? Yeah, you bet, Greg. Nelson, I can do you one better on the reply method. Go to our website, blissfulprospecting.com. Flash reply method. There's a whole guide right there. You don't even have to give an email address to download it. So check that out. If you guys want more on the reply method, it's a free guide that we have there. Any other questions, you guys? You guys good? Bunch of people on still. I'm just making sure. Going once. Going twice. Yeah. You guys good? Awesome. I appreciate all of you guys for hanging around here and all the questions and the engagement. And we'll see you soon. We'll talk to you later. Hope to see some of you in the boot camp.